The neighbor next door. The most dangerous enemies are not always strangers. Sometimes they live right next door. A fence separates you, a driveway separates you, a few feet of grass separates you, but anger, resentment, and years of conflict can slowly turn neighbors into enemies. And in one Florida neighborhood, that is exactly what happened. What began as complaints, arguments, and growing hostility would eventually end with a gunshot that shocked an entire community, and one woman would lose her life. This is the true crime story of a neighbor dispute that turned deadly. On the surface, the neighborhood looked ordinary. Children played outside, neighbors walked their dogs, families came and went for work. It was the kind of place where people expected peace. But behind closed doors, tension had been building for years. Several residents had noticed ongoing disagreements between two neighbors. One side was a mother focused on raising her children and living her life. The other was a woman who had become increasingly frustrated by what she believed was disorder around her property. The complaints never seemed to stop. Arguments became common. The atmosphere grew colder with each passing month, and little by little, frustration began replacing simple disagreement. People who lived nearby would later describe a relationship filled with hostility. Neither side trusted the other. Neither side wanted anything to do with the other. Yet they lived only steps apart. Every day was another opportunity for conflict. Every day was another reminder of the growing tension. And then came the day everything changed. It was a warm afternoon, children were outside. The neighborhood sounded normal. Nothing suggested that within minutes, a tragedy would unfold. But an argument began. Witnesses later described a confrontation involving children and growing emotions. Voices were raised, tempers flared. People stepped outside to see what was happening. For neighbors nearby, it probably felt like another chapter in a dispute they had seen many times before, but this time was different, very different. Inside her home, one neighbor armed herself with a firearm. Outside, emotions continued to rise. The conflict was no longer just words. The situation was moving towards something irreversible, and nobody could stop it. Then came the moment that changed everything. A knock, a confrontation at a door, a split-second decision, and suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the neighborhood. Silence followed. The kind of silence that arrives when people realize something terrible has happened. The woman outside collapsed. Family members screamed. Neighbors rushed toward the scene. Panic spread instantly. Within moments, emergency responders were called, but the damage had already been done. A mother had been shot, and a neighborhood dispute had become a homicide investigation. Police arrived and secured the area. Witnesses were interviewed. Evidence was collected. Investigators began piecing together exactly what had happened. The case immediately drew public attention. Many people struggled to understand how an argument between neighbors could escalate to deadly violence. Others questioned whether warning signs had been ignored. What everyone agreed on was this: a woman was dead. Children had lost their mother, and a community would never be the same again. As the investigation continued, authorities reviewed witness statements, physical evidence, and the events leading up to the shooting. The case moved through the criminal justice system. Months passed, then came the trial. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors argued that the shooting was unjustified. Defense attorneys presented their own arguments. Witnesses testified. Evidence was examined. The jury listened carefully. Every detail mattered. Every decision mattered. Because at the center of the case was a single question: was the shooting legally justified, or was it a crime? After reviewing the evidence, the jury reached a verdict: guilty. The shooter was convicted of manslaughter. For the victim's family, the verdict could never undo the loss. For the community, it could never erase what happened. But it brought legal accountability. The case that started with a neighborhood dispute ended with a criminal conviction, and a prison sentence followed. What makes this story so disturbing is how ordinary it began. There was no criminal mastermind, no elaborate plot, no stranger lurking in the shadows, just neighbors, people living side by side, people who saw each other regularly, people who allowed resentment to grow until the consequences became irreversible. Many true crime cases begin with evil intentions. This one began with conflict. The kind of conflict that exists in neighborhoods around the world every day. Most disagreements end with words. This one ended with affront.